A Tennessee community is shocked when a beloved elderly woman vanishes. As investigators search, the mystery of her disappearance deepens. The truth begins to emerge, but slowly and in unexpected directions. As police and the FBI try to help a troubled small town find their dear friend.
In 1992, a woman disappeared from her Memphis home. When the ransom went uncollected, the FBI suspected a desperate amateur and feared the worst. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. As the search for the woman progressed, investigators uncovered a web of lies and false accusations designed to hide the real perpetrator.
Memphis, Tennessee. On August 7th, 1992, 25 miles outside the city in the small town of Eads, successful land developer Alan Roberts arrived home from work. As usual, his wife's car was in the driveway, but he was surprised to find the mail there.
Doe?
His wife, Doe Roberts, usually left a note when she went out, but there was none.
Doe?
In the kitchen, Alan spotted Doe's asthma medication on the counter. She always took the inhaler when she went out. He called their closest friends nearby.
Bill? Yeah, Bill, this is Alan. Have you seen Doe today? Has she been over there?
No one he spoke to had heard from Doe.
Still not here. I'm a little bit worried, okay? I'll tell you what, I'm going to go out and look around the property for her. You do me a favor, call around and see if you can find her, okay? Hello?
Roberts worried she might have had an asthma attack while working in the garden. He searched the grounds of their farm. No sign of Doe.
Doe? Doe?
He was about to call the police when his telephone rang.
Hello, Doe?
It was a man speaking with an Asian accent.
You have Doe? What do you mean you have Doe? What do you want?
The caller demanded a $100,000 ransom for Doe's safe return.
Not a problem. I can take care of it. It'll take me a little time. You just let me know what you want me to do, and I'll do it, okay?
But he didn't explain where to take the money.
Where do you want me to take it?
Before he hung up.
Hello?
Stunned, Alan immediately called the Shelby County Sheriff's Department and told them about his wife's disappearance and the ransom call he received. A team of deputies and sheriff's inspectors responded to the house. Roberts told them he did not recognize the voice of the caller and did not know anyone who would want to harm Doe.
Came back home then about 7:30, 8 o'clock.
As the interview continued, agents from the FBI's Memphis field office arrived. Eads is about 30 miles from both the Arkansas and Mississippi borders. If someone took Doe across state lines, the FBI would take the lead, since transporting a victim state to state is a federal crime. Roberts explained he last saw his wife that morning.
So you're planning on working in the
They had
garden
eaten
today?
breakfast together, as they had every morning for 43 years.
Yes, I am. I hope it's not too hot to work.
At 10, Alan left to meet a prospective out-of-town buyer for a property he was developing.
See you later.
All right, have a good day.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.
The buyer, a man named Sam Wagner, had called the day before, making an appointment to see the property at 10:30 that morning.
Morning, Todd.
Robert said he waited for over an hour, but Sam Wagner never showed. He spent the rest of the afternoon laying sod at another of his development properties.
Sure, yeah. If you want to. Okay, we're coming this way.
The investigators needed to check the house for evidence. Robert showed them Doe's asthma inhaler and said if she suffered a serious attack without it, she could die. They needed to find her immediately. Looking for signs of forced entry, deputies checked doors and windows. Nothing appeared suspicious.
Is it locked?
Knowing that people sometimes run off voluntarily, faking abductions to cover themselves, deputies checked Doe's bedroom. Her suitcases and all of her clothing were still there, as were her valuables. It didn't seem like she left on her own. If someone had abducted her, one clue suggested it happened outside, according to FBI Special Agent Joanne Overall.
Alan Roberts located mail halfway into the garage, and it was not taken into the house. He suspected that his wife had gone to the mailbox and never made it back into the house, and she had laid the mail down at that point.
Beginning at the driveway, deputies formed search lines, fanning out in a grid pattern to scour the 150-acre farm for any sign of the 65-year-old woman, or what happened to her. Despite the efforts of multiple search teams, they found nothing. The best chance for a new lead would be additional ransom calls.
Got this hooked up. When he called,
We began monitoring Alan Roberts' phone right after the kidnapping. With his consent, we placed a recorder on his phone should he get a call from the kidnapper.
recording when the phone rings.
They also installed tracing equipment.
Leave it down the whole time you're talking. When you finish, push the
If the man with the Asian accent called again, the FBI would be ready. Later that night, the phone rang.
Hello? Yes?
It was coming from a nearby payphone.
No, just don't hurt her. I'll do whatever you want.
Deputies headed toward the source of the call.
Okay,
It sounded like the same man who called earlier.
okay.
He said
okay.
Doe was safe, for now, and he knew law enforcement was listening. Robert said the caller ordered him to remove the tape of their conversation and crush it in the driveway.
He wants me to take it outside and smash it so he's gonna watch
They
it.
quickly switched it with a blank tape.
All right, go out there and crush it and I'll watch it.
Oh, okay.
At that time, no surveillance officers were outside. When Shelby County deputies arrived at the payphone, it was clear. Whoever made the call was gone. By daybreak, investigators expanded their search into the Eads community, asking friends and neighbors when they last saw Doe and if they noticed anything unusual on the day of her disappearance.
Doe and Alan Roberts.
Yeah, sure. They live right over there.
No one recalled seeing or hearing from her that day.
Yes, sir?
One neighbor told investigators that at church that week, there seemed to be tension between Doe and Alan, but no solid clues emerged. Word of the kidnapping spread, and news stations picked up the story. Joe Birch of WMC-TV in Memphis reported on the small community's reaction to Doe's disappearance.
a lot of people felt it must have been someone from the outside who committed this crime. Because these people worshiped together, they went to square dances together, they spent a lot of their time together, and their focus was their little community and staying away from downtown Memphis and all the danger that might be here. So I think the people in the Eads community felt like an outsider probably committed this crime.
But investigators wondered how, in a place like Eads, a stranger wasn't noticed. As the investigation's first full day drew to a close, Special Agent Overall's concern grew. The 24 hours immediately following a kidnapping are critical. As more time passes, the chances of finding the victim alive diminish rapidly. On the second day, community members gathered to show their support and offer prayers for Doe's safe return. While the town of Eads prayed, investigators turned their attention to the most likely suspect.
In a case like this, we always look at the family members and relatives, people that are closest to the victim first, and then work the circle outwards.
They needed to start with the husband, Alan Roberts. It was possible he had harmed Doe, then used an accomplice to make the ransom calls. It is always difficult when family members realize they are suspects. Authorities had to ask the worried husband to take a polygraph test. It was an unexpected request, but Alan agreed. A polygraph measures a subject's physiological reactions while answering questions. The subject reviews all of the questions before the test, so there are no surprises. Though commonly called a lie detector test, a polygraph does not actually detect lies. It only detects whether the subject is exhibiting the characteristics most people exhibit when lying: spikes in heart rate, perspiration, blood pressure, and respiration.
Are you convinced that I will only ask you questions that we've gone over before?
While polygraph results are rarely admissible in court, many investigators find they point them in the right direction.
Is your first name Alan?
The examiner asked Roberts questions unrelated to the case to establish a baseline for truthful responses. Then he asked questions about his relationship with Doe and the events of the day she disappeared.
Did you kill Doe Roberts?
The examiner then interpreted the graphic output to determine if Roberts appeared to be deceptive on the questions about the case.
All right.
In his opinion, Alan Roberts answered all of the questions truthfully.
You passed?
Alan was sure this was the end of it. But agents knew that test results were not always accurate.
No, he's telling the truth. You're kidding me.
They could not eliminate him yet. To check Roberts' story, the FBI wanted to find Sam Wagner, the man he allegedly went to meet on the morning of Doe's abduction.
We thought Sam Wagner may have come into this area, and because of their financial backings and holdings, that he may have kidnapped Doe Roberts for the money that they had, because they had a substantial amount of money.
Agents checked FBI databases and nationwide DMV records, searching for anyone named Sam Wagner. In several states, FBI agents interviewed men of that name, but eliminated each as a suspect.
Alan Roberts' story became more suspicious when Sam Wagner became an unknown individual that we couldn't locate, and it became more apparent to us that Alan Roberts could possibly be behind the kidnapping.
Looks like he checks out. I don't think he's got anything.
If Alan did do something to his wife, perhaps the couple's phone records and banking statements would reveal a clue.
There's There's nothing unusual about any of the phone calls.
Yet investigators uncovered only evidence of a normal life spent in a small town, with no sign of contact with anyone suspicious, and no record of Doe spending money after August 7th. No leads were panning out. Eventually, they came to believe Doe Roberts was dead.
After approximately 2 to 3 weeks of being unable to locate the victim, it was more than likely going to end up being a homicide. I requested through my supervisor that we bring in Shelby County Sheriff's Department into the investigation to make it a joint investigation.
If it were a murder, it would be prosecuted in state court. The team returned to the Roberts house.
The second search of Alan Roberts' property was done more in a forensic frame of mind, and we were looking for blood spatterings in the house as well as in the barn.
Again, Roberts cooperated. He would do anything. Forensics technicians from the FBI and the Sheriff's Department processed the buildings, looking for any evidence of a murder, cleanup, or disposal of a body. They also gathered hairs and carpet fibers from Alan's truck to compare to any evidence recovered later. The painstaking search lasted 2 full days. Alan Roberts grew more frustrated that law enforcement had to devote so much time to him as a suspect. He was wearing down, and the real kidnapper was out there, somewhere. In 1992, the Shelby County Sheriff's Department and the Memphis FBI searched Alan Roberts' farm and its buildings for any sign of his wife's possible murder. Roberts had passed a polygraph, and now none of the items on his property tested positive for blood. Yet no other suspects emerged, and investigators had developed circumstantial evidence that implicated Roberts. Although several witnesses had seen Roberts that day, his confirmed alibi only accounted for about 5 hours. Authorities knew that left plenty of time to get rid of a body. Also, some members of the Eads community gave statements claiming Alan Roberts had acted in a suspicious manner following Doe's disappearance, according to Special Agent Joanne Overall.
People within the community felt he did not openly grieve for the loss of his wife. He was socializing shortly after her kidnapping, that both him and his wife were members of a square dancing group, and within a couple of weeks, Alan was back at the square dancing group with various partners.
News anchor Joe Birch observed Roberts' lack of emotion during media coverage.
When somebody's wife disappears, you'd expect to see a level of emotion, and we just didn't see it from Alan Roberts. He was just kind of calm, cool, and collected, and very direct, and there wasn't a lot of teary-eyed, emotional appeals that we see a lot in kidnapping cases.
Investigators kept watching Roberts as he tried to carry on with his life, struggling with the frustration of not knowing where his wife was and being the only suspect in her disappearance. Yet they saw nothing that led them to Doe Roberts. In September, the man with the Asian accent resurfaced, now saying Alan was involved.
Hello? The kidnapper began calling people in the Eads community, stating that Doe Roberts was still alive. Many of the phone calls indicated Alan was part of the scheme to kidnap his wife. It was extremely frustrating because he never gave specific points to drop money.
Several of the people who talked to the kidnapper had caller IDs on their phones, so agents traced the calls to phone booths on a well-traveled road.
We would go to the phone booths immediately, and of course, the individual who was making the phone call was already gone. Other people had already used the phone. We would check the phones for possible fingerprints, and there was just never any evidence to tie an individual to that phone.
Okay. Here?
Each of the calls were made within a few miles of the Roberts house, a significant risk in a small community buzzing about the case. This boldness suggested that the caller was an insider, familiar enough to be inconspicuous in public, and that he considered himself beyond the reach of investigators. Desperate for something solid, Alan Roberts took things into his own hands, offering a reward for Doe's safe return, and announcing he disconnected the FBI's recording and tracing equipment from his phone so the kidnapper could call freely. On October 8, 1992, 2 months after Doe disappeared, the kidnapper called Alan Roberts again.
Is she okay?
He told him to drive to a payphone at a country store a mile away. Now. Roberts hurried to the store. Once again, he was on his own, with no corroborating witness to prove what was happening. The phone was already ringing when he arrived. He hoped, finally, this would be his chance to get his wife back.
Hello?
2 months after someone abducted 65-year-old Doe Roberts, the kidnapper ordered her husband, Alan Roberts, to a payphone.
Hello? Hello?
The man with the Asian accent said Doe was alive and still with him.
That's my wife's birthday.
He asked Roberts for the name of an intermediary, someone Alan trusted that the kidnapper could contact.
Somebody at the church? What do you mean, somebody at the church?
Roberts suggested Charles Lord, a leading church member and friend of the family. The caller said he would be in touch about where to bring the ransom money.
Can I talk to Doe? Please, let me talk to Doe. What? Hello?
Then he hung up.
Well, they've been good neighbors.
Charles Lord, the man Roberts picked to be his intermediary, was a civil servant and treasurer of the local church. He made a public appeal to the kidnapper on Alan Roberts' behalf, asking the man to call him and finally give specific instructions for a ransom drop.
Call my number, and I'll line up how to get.
They all wanted to get Doe back.
There you go.
More calls from the kidnapper came to Charles Lord and others in the community, but still no details for an exchange. In November 1992, Charles Lord called investigators to his home. Special Agent Joanne Overall hoped they finally had a direct link to the kidnapper.
Charles Lord stated that late in the evening, he heard a car out on his cove. He walked down to the mailbox, and there was a letter placed in his mailbox, which was a kidnapping ransom letter.
Investigators were glad to have physical evidence. Fingerprints, hairs of fibers on the letter might provide a link to the kidnapper. But by the time they got to it, they found the evidence tainted.
Charles Lord took this letter and showed it to several people before we were called in and obtained the letter. So there was quite a few fingerprints on the letter before we got it.
Lab examiners checked all of the prints, determining they belonged to Lord and the people he let handle the letter. Nothing to lead them to the kidnapper. The message was no help either. The ransom had been lowered, but still, no instructions for a drop. It seemed the kidnapper was playing games with them. In case he contacted Lord again, agents set a trap.
Our office set up surveillance on his mailbox using a hidden camera. which was literally placed in a birdhouse close to the mailbox.
Yeah, it looks pretty good. Go ahead and tilt it up.
Okay, now, let's see if we can back off so we can see.
If the kidnapper dropped off another note, they'd have him on tape. Agents also installed wiretap and recording devices on Lord's telephone.
Basically what you do is have the phone, you just hit the play button.
They still had no real evidence against Alan Roberts. But a new suspect was developing.
Yes, sir, come on in.
Charles Lord began taking an active role in the investigation, often stopping by the sheriff's office to check on their progress.
The Roberts, Doe Roberts. Yes, sir.
The deputies became suspicious.
Wanted to come by and
He seemed too interested. Their suspicion deepened because of the peculiar nature of the phone calls he claimed he got from the kidnapper.
Charles Lord stated he received several phone calls from the kidnapper. He did say that he talked with Doe Roberts, which was unusual because none of the other callers talked with Doe Roberts.
Appreciate it.
But agents never got tapes of the calls.
Really suspicious of that guy.
But every time he received a telephone call, it appeared that our equipment didn't work.
Over the next week, Lord reported another ransom letter and one of Doe's scarves placed in his mailbox. Agents recovered no evidence from the items, but hoped their camera captured images of the kidnapper. They had plenty of the regular mail carrier. But when the tape got to where the kidnapper should appear, it went blank.
When the equipment that was placed at Charles Lord's residence continued to fail, I just thought we had poor equipment. Eventually, it became apparent that somebody was tampering with it.
Agents suspected the interference came from Charles Lord. Then the victim's husband, Alan Roberts, reported a strange encounter with Lord. He said the night before, at the Eads Community Center, Lord summoned him to a private meeting. Alan was surprised when his friend offered to help get Doe back for a price.
Alan Roberts told me that Charles Lord had advised that he had underworld contacts and that there was information available if Charles could get some money to pay for it. Also, Alan advised at that time that Charles Lord was wearing a gun.
It was clear Lord was somehow involved. But investigators needed more than suspicion. They needed evidence. On March 4th, 1993, 7 months after Doe disappeared, there was another twist in the case. Memphis news anchor Joe Birch received a call at his office.
I've never recorded a telephone conversation before, but I decided that I would record this conversation. The call set off a trigger in my mind that this could be the same individual who's been making the anonymous calls in the Doe Roberts case, and I tried to get the man to stay on the line for as long as he would stay.
As Birch spoke to the man with the Asian accent, he tried to elicit details as to who the caller was and what happened to Doe. When Birch tried to set up a ransom drop, the caller hung up.
Hello? Hello? I took the tape directly into my boss's office. We immediately called the FBI and the Shelby County Sheriff's Department.
What can you tell us about Doe Roberts?
Investigators agreed to WMC TV airing the tape, hoping it might flush the kidnapper out. It worked. The kidnapper called back. He was angry they aired the tape and demanded no more coverage. But this time, Joe Birch got him to do what no one else had.
Where is Doe Roberts
arrange a ransom drop. Agents and sheriff's inspectors staked out the drop location, ready to grab the caller who had eluded them for so long.
Is that her?
That's her.
You could be a positive.
Yeah.
As instructed, a reporter from WMC-TV drove to the spot with $80,000 in cash.
It's her, but I don't see anybody else. Do you see anybody else?
Everyone waited, hoping.
Sit tight. Sit tight. We may have somebody else. They may be waiting. Contact.
But the kidnapper never showed.
She's leaving. Okay.
It didn't happen.
One more disappointment in a frustrating investigation.
1409, be advised, subject has just left. No contact. Show us going ahead and clearing the scene.
Other deputies observed Charles Lord was home the entire time. Weeks passed with no movement on the case. Then, in June 1993, the kidnapper arranged another drop. He called two of Doe's nephews and told them to bring the ransom money to a local motel. Soon, the elusive kidnapper finally would surface. In June 1993, investigators working the Doe Roberts kidnapping staked out an Eads, Tennessee motel. Special Agent Joanne Overall was part of the surveillance.
Doe Roberts' nephews received a call from the kidnapper, and they tried to make an arranged ransom drop. They were told to go to a motel room, which they did, but they also called the FBI. They were waiting to get a phone call or meet with somebody.
Other surveillance deputies had been unable to find suspect Charles Lord that night. As the team at the motel watched, a man approached. It was Lord. He went to the room the nephews had rented.
Charles Lord told the nephews of Doe Roberts that he had received a call from the kidnapper and that he was to show up there and get the money, and he would receive a phone call as to where to take the money.
But the nephews wouldn't give him the cash. They said they wanted to deal with the kidnapper directly. Investigators were sure that was exactly who they were dealing with.
He is the only individual who had received a telephone call stating that he had talked with Doe Roberts, and now he was meeting with somebody to pick up money, but we did not have enough evidence at that time to go forward with an arrest.
They did, however, increase their focus on Lord. To look for a financial motive to the kidnapping, the FBI subpoenaed Lord's bank records.
Yes, sir.
We went through records trying to determine if he had loans out, what his financial holdings were, and it became apparent that Charles Lord owed a lot of money to several banks in town, substantial amounts of money, and that he was unable to meet the payments and that he had filed for bankruptcy.
That circumstantial evidence allowed investigators to secure a search warrant for Lord's house. In late June 1993, they served the warrant, which allowed them to look for and seize any financial documents. Some of the files they recovered revealed Lord's criminal past.
He had embezzled over $150,000 from the Memphis depot, where he had retired several years prior, and he had embezzled approximately $70,000 from the church there in Eads, where he was attending.
As treasurer of the church, Lord had access to the parish bank accounts and cash donations. Despite the find, investigators still had no direct evidence of the abduction.
We had nothing that we could use to charge him with the kidnapping and the murder of Doe Roberts. It was important to obtain a confession from Charles Lord because we had no body.
Good, maybe this will help us out a little bit.
One agent working the case was trained in criminal profiling.
He wants some more attention.
Analyzing Lord's actions, he offered a behavioral profile to help get the confession.
We have here, we got all these files. Is he gonna repeat his...
He suggested Lord was a manipulative, pathological liar who believed he was untouchable.
It's gonna help us out, but I don't know if it's gonna...
The agent felt that overwhelming the suspect's ego was the only way to beat him.
What you guys need to do is let
The
him...
plan was to bring Lord in for an interview and let him see what he would take to be evidence of a massive investigation against him for months.
push into his confessing.
Agents created numerous evidence boxes, hoping to trump Lord's belief he was above the investigation. Then, on August 25, 1993, at the FBI's Memphis field office, investigators met with Lord and his attorney.
I got some questions about, do you know anything about Mrs. Doe Roberts?
As Charles Lord sat in that room during the interview, I was watching him look at these boxes, realizing that he had been under surveillance for a lot longer than he had anticipated, and he became very nervous.
The FBI's tactics appeared to be working. Lord eventually admitted to making some of the ransom calls. He said he did it to keep the investigation alive for Doe's sake, but denied any involvement in her abduction. Sensing that he was ready to crack, the investigators offered him a deal.
Charles Lord was told by our office, as well as the Shelby County inspector, that if he would take a polygraph and pass a polygraph, we would not look at him any further for the Doe Roberts kidnapping. However, if he failed the polygraph, his attorney and Charles Lord agreed to a further interrogation in reference to the kidnapping.
He agreed. After asking control questions to gauge Lord's truthful response levels, the polygraph examiner asked about Doe, including whether Lord was involved in her abduction.
Did you harm Doe Roberts?
In the end, the examiner believed the polygraph results showed Lord being deceptive. Though the results could not be used in court, they meant authorities could continue questioning the suspect. With Lord's attorney present in the interrogation room, FBI agents and inspectors from the Shelby County Sheriff's Department pressed the suspect, returning again and again to the polygraph results.
I've got every piece of evidence I need, what I need you to do.
At first, he continued to deny involvement, but after several hours, the interview tactics wore him down. Lord said he was ready to tell them what happened. He said he needed cash to pay back his loans and cover the money he stole from the church, and decided to kidnap Doe for ransom. On August 6, 1992, he called the Roberts, posing as a property buyer named Sam Wagner, and arranged to meet Alan. The next day, when he knew Alan was waiting at the development property, he drove by their house. Doe was bringing in the mail.
Doe, there's been an accident.
He knew she would trust him.
Alan's been involved in an accident. Yeah, get in the car and I'll take you to him.
What happened? Do you know? Is he all right?
Lord told investigators he planned to release Doe after he got the ransom, but she suffered a fatal heart attack in his car. He said he panicked and dumped her body and her purse, but he would not say where.
Would you be willing to take us to where she is?
The investigators believed he was lying, at least about planning to release Doe, and perhaps about other details.
You did what you were supposed to do.
Special Agent Joanne Overall knew they had to find the body to check his story. They offered a deal.
Charles Lord agreed to tell us where Doe Roberts' body was after he had confessed to the kidnapping in exchange for Shelby County not pursuing the death penalty.
Lord claimed he dumped her in the Wolf River, a slow-moving river that runs 90 miles across the southwest corner of the state. The Wolf River empties into the Mississippi at Memphis. Lord said he dumped the remains from a bridge in Fayette County, 13 miles from the Roberts' home. Divers would begin 50 yards upriver, searching for the body and purse. Lieutenant John Yancey of the Shelby County Sheriff's Department led the dive in the murky river.
We had 21 divers involved total. The visibility in the river was zero. It was total black water.
And in the dark water, several species of venomous snakes. Adding to the challenge was the fact that the crime took place a year earlier. Any remains would be scattered and difficult to find. FBI agents and sheriff's deputies helped the divers by stretching a rope across the river's width. Divers held onto the rope and moved across its length, searching the river bottom by hand.
Normally you do an arm span, arm over arm for a search for a body because it's large. But we were looking for contents of the purse at the time to try to make sure that this was actually the scene. So we had to bring it down to where we were, instead of doing the large arm spans, we were having to do what I call this the hand grab. And that's where you just get the dirt with your hand, and that way you're able to find everything on the bottom.
Once the divers reached the other bank, the team would move the rope a foot downriver and start over. Anytime a diver found something, he signaled, and additional divers came in to mark and extract the item.
We found a safe that had been taken in a robbery of a cleaner's, and the money had fallen out of the safe, and we found the pennies on the bottom and the dollar bills, but we found no contents of any of her purse. So I feel like if we'd have found pennies on the bottom, we would have found her makeup or a wallet or IDs or anything times back to her.
In 110-degree heat, the team continued their search of every square inch.
On my second day, I was on the bridge, and an elderly lady walked up to me and said, "I want you to do me a favor." And I said, "I'll try to if I can." She said, "I want you to find us something today so we can get this over with, so we can go ahead and bury Doe and get this case over with."
After 3 full days, they had searched a half-mile of the river. They believed the body would not have gone farther than that in the lowland waters.
I went to my boss, my chief, and I told him, I said, based on my experience and what we have done, she's not in here. But if you want us to continue the search, we'll search till it runs into Mississippi. Ever how you want to do it. But I can tell you right now, she's not here.
Investigators were convinced Lord had lied to them, unnecessarily placing the dive team in danger. Special Agent Overall confronted Lord.
We took Charles Lord out to the site and explained to him that these divers were putting their lives in jeopardy and we needed to find the body, and it didn't appear that the body was there.
The suspect had run out of lies. Now he was ready to tell investigators what really happened to Doe Roberts. After a 3-day search of Tennessee's Wolf River, dive leader Lieutenant John Yancey believed the remains of kidnapping victim Doe Roberts were not in the river.
We had searched everywhere possible, and just over the years of experience, I would have found something by now, either some bones, some makeup, or something. I said, based on my experience, she's not in here. There the divers are. She's not there.
Investigators confronted suspect Charles Lord.
The deal's going to come off the table.
Realizing they would not give up until they got the truth, Lord admitted Doe had not died of a heart attack in his car.
They've
He said he took her to his house and tied her up in a room above the garage. He could never let his neighbor go, now. He tried to kill her with sleeping pills. When that didn't work, he smothered her with a pillow. Lord said he buried her in his backyard compost heap. On top of the body, he placed a layer of lime, then concrete, hoping they would hasten decomposition. They needed to determine if Lord was telling the truth this time, to retrieve evidence and give Doe's family the closure of knowing what happened.
Stand by.
The sheriff's department called in forensic anthropologists from the University of Tennessee. After removing layers of leaves and compost, they began the dig. Shelby County Sheriff's Lieutenant Ronald Goodwin supervised the meticulous excavation.
It's just using brushes and little trowels, much like uncovering artifacts. And it's one spoonful at a time to make sure that you don't miss any evidence and make sure you don't do anything to harm what evidence may be with the body.
After 2 hours, they pierced a shell of concrete and lime. In the space underneath, a body.
Well, the first thing that we came to was the hand. The rest of the body was laying flat in the grave site on its back, face up.
It took 17 hours to completely exhume the remains, and what investigators found surprised them.
The skin was intact. The body was in such good condition, I felt like that many scientific tests that we could run might reveal. It's poisoning, cause of death, sexual attack, or whatever. It appeared that the actions that Mr. Lord had taken, such as the lime and so forth on top of the body, had worked in reverse, and it had preserved the body for us.
The most chilling detail was the position of the 65-year-old woman's hand.
The only thing that was out of normal position was the hand, which was up in front of her face in a defensive position with the fingers spread.
It appeared to investigators she might not have been dead when she was buried.
Maybe she was still alive. Maybe she was pushing up with her hand.
Over a year after Doe Roberts disappeared, the FBI and Alan Roberts had their evidence. On October 19th, 1993, Charles Lord pled guilty to first-degree murder and kidnapping. He was sentenced to life plus 25 years. Doe's husband, Alan, had endured being a suspect for months. Now, with the truth out, he could finally lay Doe to rest. But one challenge remains for Alan Roberts.
It's an uneven closure. I'm trying to forget about Charles Lord, and I'm praying that God will let me forgive him. I'm praying that Doe is in God's hands right now.
Mr. and Mrs. Roberts enjoyed 43 years of marriage before they were torn apart. He has faith that one day he will see her again. In July 1997, a triple murder terrified residents in the nation's capital. Investigators could find no immediate suspects and no clear motive for the attack. Metro DC police turned to the FBI for help. They hoped the Bureau's technical expertise could bring justice for the victims of the triple homicide.
At a Georgetown coffee shop in Washington, D.C., 3 employees were shot to death. Evidence at the crime scene pointed in many different directions. Was this a hate crime, a robbery gone wrong, or an act of cold-blooded vengeance against one of the victims? I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. What seemed at first to be a senseless act of violence soon grew into a crime of federal proportions.
In 1997, Washington, D.C. and its monuments played host to thousands over the 3-day 4th of July weekend. Visitors attended Independence Day celebrations throughout the capital. By Monday morning, July 7th, the holiday was officially over. Inhabitants of the Georgetown section of D.C. were just waking up to face the work week. At 5:15 a.m., the day shift supervisor at a popular coffee shop arrived to prepare for the onslaught of rush hour. She was surprised to see the night manager's car in the parking lot. The shop should have been closed at 8 p.m. the previous night. She found the lights still on, the music playing, and fresh pastries behind the counter. Yet no one seemed to be there, and the shop hadn't been thoroughly cleaned. She checked the shift schedule to see who was working the night before.
Katie? Katie?
She headed toward the back room, searching for her colleagues or some sort of explanation.
Katie?
There, she found the slaughtered bodies of the night crew.
Oh my God! Oh my God!
She fled the shop and flagged down the first vehicle she saw, a city bus. The driver called the police.
Yeah.
By dawn, the D.C. Metropolitan Police had sealed the shop and began to process the scene. A shoe print found by the front door did not match the soles of any of the victims, nor the day managers.
Show you back there? Okay.
3 employees were killed by multiple gunshots. Night manager Katie Mahoney, age 24. 18-year-old Aaron David Goodrich, and Emery Allen Evans, age 25. The victims had apparently been caught in the middle of their cleanup routine sometime after closing at 8 p.m. Katie Mahoney, who sustained most of the gunfire, was apparently still holding her keys when she fell. To Metropolitan Police Detective James Trainham, the wanton violence seemed like an act of personal vengeance.
When I first learned of how the bodies were positioned and the number of shots that had been inflicted on Katie, one of the initial theories was it was a domestic, that she had had a fight with a boyfriend and ex-boyfriend. The other 2 were in the back room, giving them some privacy. She had gone to the back, followed by the boyfriend, and he exploded, shot her multiple times, and then shot them as they tried to come to her assistance.
6 spent casings and 4 slugs from a .380 semi-automatic were collected from the floor. In the ceiling over the safe, they discovered one of 3 slugs from a .38 revolver. Multiple shots from 2 different guns suggested at least 2 gunmen. Detective Trainham now theorized that it might have been a robbery gone horribly wrong.
When we found out that there were 2 guns and that there was a shot to the ceiling above the safe, which is typically a warning type shot, then that's when we started looking at commercial robbery. Now, was it totally conclusive that that made it a robbery? No, absolutely not.
If it was a robbery attempt, the gunmen had likely panicked since they left empty-handed. The cash drawers were untouched, and there were no signs the safe had been tampered with. A receipt showed that one of the employees purchased a pound of coffee at 8:40, which meant they were likely still alive 40 minutes after the shop had closed. Detectives spoke to one witness who stopped by the shop at about 9:15 the previous evening. He saw the two male employees inside cleaning, but the door was locked, so he left, assuming it was closed. Several other would-be customers told detectives that they had visited the store moments later at around 9:30.
Then at 9:30, we had actually two groups of people independently walk up to the front door. The door was unlocked. They walked right on in. They looked around. They could see that the store was in the process of being cleaned up, but there was nobody there. So they figured that people were in the back, and they left at that time. So we figured, based on that sort of information, that the murders occurred between 9:15 and 9:30.
But the day shift manager told the detective that when she arrived in the morning, the front door was locked. The back door had been locked as well. There was no way to lock them without a key. If it was an inside job, she had a good idea of who it might be.
One of the first things she told us about was an ex-employee who had been fired just a few weeks before that. He had a drug habit. He was a shift manager, so he had access to the safe, to the alarms.
The night after the theft, Katie noticed a discrepancy in the cash drawers on her shift. She tracked the loss to a single employee and fired him.
Fine. Stupid.
The company did not press charges against the man, and he agreed to pay back what he took over time. Police interviewed the ex-employee at his Georgetown home. He explained that he and Katie had worked out a payback agreement for the money he owed. He claimed to harbor no bad feelings towards her. Investigators photographed the soles of his shoes to compare against the print recovered at the crime scene. They provided no match. He said he was out of town at the time of the murders. His alibi checked out.
Thank you.
The viciousness of the slayings became clearer at the autopsy. Katie Mahoney had been shot 5 times. Emery Allen Evans had been shot 3 times. Aaron David Goodrich had been shot once, the bullet piercing both lungs and his heart. Slugs removed from the victims confirmed that 2 weapons had been used. The unsolved murders riveted the public's attention.
We are deeply saddened by the loss of 3 partners.
The owners of the coffee shop chain offered a $50,000 reward for information leading to the killers.
Emery Evans, also a barista.
Calls poured in. Some believed it was a hate crime against the minority victims. Others claimed it may have something to do with Katie's former internship at the White House. What seemed more likely was that one of the victims may have been an accomplice who was double-crossed after giving access to the killers.
The fact that no money was taken did increase the number of possible theories as to why and actually what happened inside the store. But I think that once we did look into the background of the employees, once we found out what type of people they were, that began to eliminate a lot of the theories. Maybe Katie was supposed to be there.
To help focus the investigation, the detective called on his friend from the FBI Washington field office, Special Agent Brad Garrett. Over the years, Detective Trainham had come to rely on Agent Garrett's expertise.
I've had a lot of experience in analyzing crime scenes, doing victimology, studying offender characteristics. And so it's sort of like another set of eyes looking at a scene. You know, there's nothing magical about it, but I think Jim respects my opinion and asked me initially to come take a look.
The next day, investigators returned to the coffee shop to search for more clues. They noted the store had no security cameras, and its alarm had not been breached the night of the crime. The front lock functioned properly and showed no signs of tampering. Perhaps the killers had entered with a key since the door was locked after the murders. The investigators tried to piece together events with what little they knew. They figured that the crew was still cleaning the store just after 9:15. That's when the killers must have burst in. Immediately, the gunmen probably hustled the crew into the back room closer to the safe. This is where they had apparently lost control of the situation. The bullet hole in the ceiling looked like a warning shot designed to get attention. The shot to the ceiling, deafening the enclosed space, probably only increased everyone's panic, resulting in this triple tragedy. Investigators concluded that robbery, not murder, was likely the gunman's initial intention. They also believed the perpetrators had robbed before and would do so again.
It's fairly rare in robbery situations where they kill either the patrons or the employees of the store. So I wasn't really looking at groups that had killed other people. I was looking at groups that came in, guns drawn, were ready to commit violence if they needed to commit violence. So, and again, that's not uncommon for people in robberies, obviously, to pull guns out. But typically people that will rob a commercial facility like this coffee store will typically then target similar type situations.
But the scenario presented few clues to the killer's identities. Investigators hoped an overlooked answer remained in the shop. Behind the counter, the detective found Katie Mahoney's to-do list. She had almost completed it the night she was killed. One item she hadn't checked off yet was to apologize to an employee. Detectives learned that Katie had reprimanded the employee for his less than professional appearance a few days before she was killed. The man said that he bore no grudge against Katie.
I was just shooting the pool for my buddy Steve. That's all we were doing.
And what's your buddy?
He explained that she was sensitive and might have felt concerned that she'd been too harsh with him, but he didn't feel that way.
Okay, all right.
Investigators confirmed he was with friends when the murders took place. It was another dead end. Detective Trainham pored over store procedures and policies and discovered that someone else had been to the store at 2 a.m.
We found out that the pastry guy comes with his delivery. When he arrived there that morning, he just assumed that the door was locked, used his key, pushed the carts in, closed it, and locked it behind. And that's how come when the shift manager got there, all the doors were locked.
The pastry delivery explained why the front door had been locked, but it did not reveal how the killers gained entry. 3 days after the triple homicide, investigators still had no leads to the killers' identities. The murderers were still on the loose. On July 7th, 1997, 3 employees had been shot to death in a Georgetown coffee shop. A reward offered by corporate headquarters and local businesses for information grew to $100,000, the largest for a crime in D.C. history. The heavy publicized reward induced dozens of false claims. For Special Agent Brad Garrett, chasing rumors is part of the job.
One thing you have to do in any of these cases is you have to keep a lot of balls in the air at the same time. You can't just do one thing. So while we're looking at the backgrounds of the victim, disgruntled employees, employees that have been fired, we're also looking at robbery groups. We're also talking to robbery homicide detectives in the metropolitan area about what cases they've had. Is there anybody that sort of fits this genre of what happened?
How you doing, bud?
Despite their efforts, they found no leads after 2.5 months. Then on September 27th, 1997, Metropolitan Homicide detectives received an anonymous call.
DC homicide.
The caller claimed that 2 people were involved in the shooting.
What's that?
One was named Carl.
Carl?
He didn't know Carl's last name, but described him as thin, mid-20s, with brown skin, according to Detective James Trainham.
He said Carl lived on Gallatin Street, described the location where he lived, and he said he lived there with his mother, his wife, and his child, and that they drove a car that was a different color blue. He said, if anybody is telling you anything else, they're wrong.
Name, sir? No.
The man promised to call back when he learned more.
Detective Training. Just got some good information.
Investigators checked DMV records and assembled a list of all the cars on Gallatin Street in Washington, D.C. On the 1200 block, they found one registered to a man named Carl Cooper. The car was listed as blue. A criminal background check revealed that 28-year-old Carl Cooper had a record of commercial armed robbery and suspected murder.
I got you, man. Go ahead.
Carl Cooper and an associate robbed 2 convenience stores at gunpoint in Prince George's County, Maryland in January 1989. When Cooper's associate was later found shot to death, Cooper was the prime suspect, but police never found enough evidence to prove he killed his partner. His criminal record, coupled with the anonymous caller's statement, made Carl Cooper the prime suspect in the coffee shop triple homicide. Investigators needed to find out more about Cooper. Special Agent Brad Garrett secured a warrant to establish a trap and trace on Cooper's home phone.
A pin register and trap and trace would give you incoming and outgoing telephone numbers only. You cannot hear what goes on the line, but it records every time you dial a number out, it shows up on a screen, and every time someone calls into you, it shows up, and it shows up and shows the duration of the call. So what that did, obviously, it gave us who Mr. Cooper was talking to, what individuals out there in the community is he interacting with.
Agents discovered that one man who worked as a local barber called Cooper's home frequently. Informants claimed the barber was likely Cooper's accomplice in the coffee shop killings. To gather more information on Cooper and those who visited him, undercover agents dressed as telephone repairmen and set up surveillance on Carl Cooper's house.
We'd put up a very discreet pole camera outside his house where it would shoot 24 hours a day on his front door to see, obviously, who's coming and going, what hours does he keep, what is his routine, what cars does he get into, who comes to visit him.
Agents didn't need a court order since it was public surveillance. They monitored Cooper around the clock and created a videotape record of everyone entering and leaving the
They have it
house.
right on the house, right?
Yeah, look,
Okay, great.
I can zoom up if we need to. Pretty much go anywhere we want.
They identified his child and his wife. The surveillance was not limited to his home. Teams were also assigned to tail Cooper throughout the city. Carl Cooper visited the barber's shop where his alleged accomplice worked. Investigators needed to somehow confirm if the barber had been involved in the coffee shop killings. They hoped a trap and trace on his phone would tell them more.
At this point, we're just trying to figure out who this guy is in the barber shop and what is his relationship with Carl, and had he committed robberies with Carl. So we did a background on him. He had served time for armed robbery. And based on what sources were telling us, that the two of them, along with other individuals, had committed armed robberies.
Agents discovered a stronger connection through the trap and trace on the barber's phone. They recognized the name of a woman who called the barber frequently. She was the former girlfriend of the robbery partner allegedly killed by Cooper several years earlier. She said that Cooper, the barber, and her boyfriend at the time were all friends before her boyfriend was killed.
What kind of person was he?
Now she only kept in touch with the barber, since she believed Cooper was responsible for her boyfriend's death. She also knew Cooper's wife and explained how she helped him with his crimes. Carl Cooper's wife purchased weapons illegally for him. One was a 9mm handgun. His wife used a driver's license with her maiden name and an old address, so the 9mm couldn't be traced back to her husband, Carl.
That's $200?
Carl's accomplices used their girlfriends in the same way.
His wife, Melissa.
The girlfriend was extremely cooperative. She was still interested in bringing closure to his case. And she gave us even more background on Carl Cooper and his associates. She told us about a third person who was working with them during the summer of 1997 committing robberies.
Investigators placed Carl Cooper's alleged third man under surveillance. He was a small-time crack dealer. If he in fact knew anything about the murders, his blatant criminal activity made him a liability to Cooper. Authorities planned to arrest the dealer after a series of undercover drug buys and force him to come clean about the murder suspect. But it would take weeks, perhaps months, to establish trust and purchase enough crack to charge him with felony drug trafficking. If they arrested him before that, the charges would not be stiff enough to leverage his cooperation. Until then, investigators had no evidence to arrest Carl Cooper for the coffee shop triple homicide. And as time passed, Cooper would be more difficult to get to since he had insulated himself with so many. By the end of July 1998, over a year had passed since 3 employees at a Georgetown coffee shop had been shot to death. The FBI and DC Metro Police believed that 29-year-old Carl Cooper and at least one accomplice were responsible. But investigators still had no direct proof. To find it, they pursued Cooper from all directions, tracing his calls, watching his house, and surveilling his associates. Despite their relentlessness, Cooper remained just out of reach. But investigators did learn that Cooper knew he was a suspect, according to FBI Special Agent Brad Garrett.
As you move into these cases further and further and you talk to more and more people, particularly people on the street, the word's going to get back to whoever you're looking at if they're out on the street. And it did. I mean, he knew in fairly short order that the police and the FBI were taking a look at him.
The FBI and Metro DC Police were not the only agencies investigating Cooper. In nearby Prince George's County, Maryland, Sergeant Joseph McCann was investigating Cooper for the attempted murder of a police officer.
Jim, Joe McCann, how are you?
The sergeant was working with a female informant who also wanted to tell the FBI what she knew about Cooper.
The informant and Mr. Cooper had committed several armed robberies together, which is the reason why the informant was in jail for armed robbery at the time. So she knew him very well.
I was the getaway driver. There's 2 others involved.
Investigators interviewed her at a prison in Pennsylvania. Though she had no direct knowledge of the coffee shop murders, she knew firsthand how Cooper operated. The woman told about a pizzeria robbery that they'd committed in September 1996. Cooper was the leader. She was the driver of the stolen getaway car. Cooper's friend, the barber, and the woman's boyfriend at the time were also in on the job. She said that Cooper carried 2 guns into the restaurant that night, as he usually did.
All right, everybody, don't move! Don't move! Be quiet! Get that money out of there!
His job was to shoot anyone who didn't obey orders.
Where's something I wanted? Right now, let's go! Come on, let's go! Go, guys, let's go! Hurry up! Move!
No gunfire was needed that night. They collected the cash drawer and wallets and made a fast getaway.
Tell me just as best you can recall what Cooper told you.
The informant wasn't finished. She told investigators about another robbery shortly after the pizzeria heist, when Cooper had fired his weapon. That evening, Cooper carried a 9mm and a stolen .38 revolver. The barber drove the getaway car. Their plan was to rob couples parked in Avondale Park in Hyattsville, Maryland.
Give me your money.
Cooper was unaware that the man he attacked was an off-duty Maryland officer. Cooper fired twice, hitting him once.
Eric, I believe his name was.
The informant said that Cooper had told her about it the next day, when the news revealed that the man he shot was an off-duty police officer.
How long had you been?
Fortunately, the officer survived the attack.
That'll do it.
A check of police reports confirmed everything the informant had said. Special Agent Brad Garrett had every reason to believe her.
Her level of detail was just phenomenal, you know, which she was able to lay out when it happened, where it happened, what time it happened, who participated, even the interaction between the robbers and the victims that we knew about, obviously, through what the victims had told us during the robbery. So she was really a pot of gold in this case.
The information demonstrated that Cooper wasn't just a violent criminal. He was the leader of a band of robbers. The informant had provided facts that the FBI could build a case around.
She was basically the first bit of information that, in my mind and in the prosecutor's mind, that really started fitting a RICO case or a racketeering case, where you've got a group that's committing violent acts interstate, robbing commercial facilities, and that we saw through her the real possibility of putting together a federal RICO indictment that would include the coffee store triple murder.
Building a racketeering case that proved Carl Cooper was the leader of a criminal organization meant outlining those activities in detail. The FBI secured a warrant to wiretap Cooper's phone. Now they could capture conversations, not just phone numbers.
We're going to record any incoming conversations as well.
As part of the warrant, they also cloned Cooper's pager number. Anytime someone paged Cooper, the agent's pager would also beep. With everything in place, Detective Trainham hoped to stimulate conversation between Cooper and his associates. They began by inquiring on the whereabouts of the 9mm handgun purchased illegally by Cooper's wife.
Well, we knew that his wife had made that purchase of a handgun for him in 1996. So what we did was we went out to the address that she had given the gun shop when she had purchased the gun, and it turned out to be her mother's address.
As a ruse to get information, investigators asked the mother if her daughter still had the 9mm handgun. They told her they needed to complete a routine check of its serial number to verify whether it had been used in a crime.
Well, she hasn't called me. I have not disowned, I just have not heard.
The woman claimed that she had not spoken to her daughter since they had had a disagreement some time ago. Investigators felt sure that she was lying.
As we were walking back to the car, a distance of less than 50 feet, Carl's pager starts going off with 911, 911 behind it. And we knew that we had probably struck some kind of nerve there at that point.
Already. She doesn't know where she is.
The number.
I don't believe it.
Agents monitoring Cooper's home phone heard the mother call to warn that authorities were looking for her daughter's gun.
Hey, it comes again.
Cooper's wife tried paging Carl, but he didn't respond. Next, she called her father, panicking because she couldn't find the weapon and feared that she'd be implicated in her husband's crimes.
If anybody's going to worry, she's the
Carl's wife was on a cordless phone, sitting outside on the front porch, and she's on the phone to one of her relatives, hysterically sobbing about how the police are going to lock her up for this gun, that Carl's done something with this gun, and that she looked in the hiding place in the house and the gun wasn't there, so Carl must have it. And she was just going on and on and on. So then she calls Carl, and he's on his way home. He's on a cell phone on his way home, and she says, "Carl, I'm going to call this police officer right now." And he's screaming at her, "No, no, don't call." I mean, just screaming at her on the phone.
After Cooper's wife hung up, investigators went to her residence to speak with her directly.
Wife said they were here.
They knew she and Carl were home, but no one came to the door. After almost 14 months of pursuit, investigators were confident they were closing in on the suspected murderer. But Cooper was not the sort of man to sit idly by and allow himself to be cornered. In September 1998, Metropolitan Washington, D.C. police and the FBI continued to pursue Carl Cooper, the alleged ringleader of an armed gang wanted in the triple homicide of 3 Georgetown coffee shop employees. Surveillance of Cooper's house, phone, family, and friends began to pay off for investigators. Detective James Trainham overheard an incriminating conversation between Cooper's wife and the girlfriend of one of Cooper's alleged accomplices.
So she's trying to figure out why the police are looking at Carl. And she starts what we call this guessing game. And she goes, "Was it for the shooting in the park?" Missy goes, "No." "Was it for the robbery of the pizza place?" She goes, "No." And then she says, "Well, what is it?" And Missy goes something along the lines of, "You know, that thing I told you about, that thing in Georgetown." And the other woman brings up, "You mean the coffee shop?" And she goes, Yeah. At that point, we knew that his wife and this other woman had intimate knowledge of all these other crimes that Carl had committed.
This is $200?
Using her maiden name and mother's address, investigators were already aware that Cooper's wife had purchased a 9mm illegally for her husband. Now they would turn up the pressure on Carl's wife to reveal the whereabouts of the handgun. Investigators showed up at Cooper's wife's workplace unannounced to again ask her where the 9mm was. According to Detective James Trainham, they caught her completely off guard, which was their intention.
We're here to talk to you about the gun.
And when she saw us, it was like she hit a brick wall. I mean, just her face dropped. She began to shake. She became very nervous. And we're, just very, very calm. "Mrs. Cooper, we don't know why you're so upset. This is just a routine investigation."
You okay at home?
Cooper's wife told them that she still had the 9mm handgun, but it was in storage in Maryland.
I don't know.
Good.
She agreed to turn it over to them later that evening at her grandfather's home. Close to the appointed time, FBI agents watched suspected murderer Carl Cooper removing what appeared to be a gun case from his house. Agents were not sure what to expect at the meeting with his family.
Garrett?
Maybe it was a
Cooper
trap.
just left in the car. He had the gun with him.
The agent wore a wire to alert other agents parked close by if they should need assistance.
Why you in my house?
As they approached
You have no
Cooper's
reason
wife's
to be-
grandfather's Maryland home, Cooper confronted them.
Your house, you here?
He accused the agents of harassing his wife, but he didn't prevent them from going inside. Her grandfather and child sat at the table with the gun.
Do not touch the gun.
Since the 9mm handgun was already in plain view, investigators were legally permitted to seize it. That type of weapon was not used in the coffee shop killings, but it was the same type used to shoot an off-duty officer in a Maryland park. Agents sent the gun to the ballistics lab where it was test-fired and compared to the slugs removed from the wounded officer. Shallow grooves, imprinted by the inside of the barrel on each of the slugs, did not match. But the marks made by the weapon's ejector pin on the shell casings matched those on the shell casings collected from the crime scene. Experts determined that the barrel might have been switched or altered, but they agreed that this was definitely the gun used to shoot the officer in Maryland, according to Sergeant Joseph McCann.
Once we received that ballistic report and we confirmed that this weapon that was registered to Carl Cooper's wife was used to shoot an off-duty Prince George's County police officer, at that point we had entered into a completely different realm in the investigation. It stepped it up considerably at that point.
Though investigators had evidence against Cooper for that crime, they had little to charge him for the Georgetown triple homicide or for federal racketeering. To get to Cooper, Special Agent Brad Garrett and his team turned back to one of Cooper's alleged accomplices, a crack dealer who had been under surveillance for months.
We set up multiple crack buys from this guy until eventually we got up to a quantity that he faced a mandatory minimum sentence in federal court, and then we arrested him. The key was to get him to help us.
Investigators would pressure him to inform on Cooper in exchange for a reduction in his trafficking charges.
1, 2, 3.
To avoid years in prison, the dealer agreed to wear a wire. He wasn't as close to Cooper as agents had hoped. But the dealer was close to another one of Cooper's alleged accomplices.
Hey,
his
what's
friend
up?
from the barber shop.
Good, good.
He called the barber to set up a
I was wondering
meeting.
if I could meet with you guys.
The entire conversation would be caught on tape. The informant told the barber that police had stopped him on the street, asking questions about their involvement with Carl Cooper in the triple homicide. The barber was already aware of the investigation and assured him that he had nothing to do with it.
Barbershop guy kind of whispers to the drug dealer, "Look, I know Carl did it. He called me the night before and he wanted me to go along with him. But he never called me back. I said I would, but he never called me back. And then the next morning, bam, they were dead."
Other than the anonymous caller that put them on the trail shortly after the crime, this was the FBI's first real connection between Cooper, his gang, and the coffee shop homicides. Now it was the barber's turn to be taken in. Agents hoped he would be the key to taking a triple murderer off the streets.
All we need on that one.
A year and a half after a botched robbery and triple homicide in a Georgetown coffee shop, the FBI and Washington Metro Police were closing in on a gang of suspected thieves and murderers. The barber, believed to be one of them, told an FBI informant that he had agreed to rob the coffee shop with ringleader Carl Cooper. But Cooper never called him back, so the barber figured Cooper had committed the crime by himself. FBI Special Agent Brad Garrett decided it was time to question the barber directly and find out how much he knew about Cooper.
So we thought at that point, well, the barbershop guy obviously knows something about this, but he's basically saying he would have participated, but wasn't called, so didn't participate. So we weren't sure at that point. Now, then, did Cooper do it alone? Did he pull somebody else in to help him do the robbery? We weren't really sure. But we then had enough that we could charge the barbershop guy.
Early in the morning, authorities followed the barber from his home and cornered him in an isolated location. Agents wanted to be certain that no one, especially Carl Cooper, knew that Cooper's suspected accomplice was being taken in. The barber was arrested without incident and transported to the FBI office for questioning. The man once again denied any participation in the coffee shop homicides. But he did tell agents what Carl Cooper had said the night before the crime.
He told us that Carl had come to him and said, you know, I've been surveilling this coffee shop. It doesn't have any surveillance cameras. They take in a lot of money, and I want to hit it. And he said, okay, I'll go with you.
What do you want
The
me
barber
to tell you?
maintained that Cooper never called him back.
Start at the beginning.
And as far as he knew, the ringleader had no other accomplices on the job. Even if the barber hadn't participated in the coffee shop murders, authorities had enough to charge him with conspiracy to commit armed robbery. Hoping for leniency, he told them what he knew about Cooper. On May 1st, 1993, he and Cooper committed their first crime together. The barber didn't have a gun, but Cooper said he would get one for him. They spotted an armed security guard at a D.C. apartment building. Cooper snuck up on him.
Hey.
When the guard tried to draw his weapon, Cooper shot him, then took the dead man's gun.
Carl runs out, runs to him, and they take off. So that's a murder we didn't even know about that Cooper had done. So that also was another case that was rolled into this RICO indictment.
We ran into the pizza store, and it was
The barber understood that stopping Cooper was the FBI's ultimate goal. He agreed to wear a wire and meet with Cooper. Agents followed the barber through less populated roads after he picked up Cooper in his car. In the course of their recorded conversation, Cooper expressed his rage that the authorities were on his back.
Did you hear that, Nick?
Yeah.
Sounds like he wants to kill a DC cop.
He vowed to kill Agent Garrett and Detective Trainham.
He also admitted that at one point he had seen Brad Garrett on the street, and he had followed him for a while, and he was laughing about how Brad didn't know that he was being followed. And so it was a bit unnerving, but we knew that we had to arrest Carl pretty quickly after that.
Authorities weren't going to take any chances. A few days later, they decided to arrest him for shooting the officer in Maryland. They hoped a search warrant for his house would provide the physical evidence needed to tie him directly to the coffee shop slayings. Inside Cooper's home, officers found ski masks, law enforcement clothing, and a variety of ammunition. But none of it could prove that Carl Cooper had murdered the 3 employees at the coffee shop. The FBI's last hope was to sweat it out of him. Cooper knew that all they had was evidence of conspiracy and hearsay from secondary sources. Despite 2 hours of grilling, Cooper remained steadfast in his denial. Time had run out on the investigation.
We did not have a good case on him for the coffee shop murders. But if we charged him with the racketeering in D.C., then we would be under a time constraint to get him indicted and convicted. And we just didn't want to place ourselves under that constraint. So we decided that PG County had the strongest case, that they were the ones that were going to be able to hold him without letting him get out of jail, thus placing all of our other people in jeopardy.
After his interview in D.C., officers from Prince George's County, Maryland, came to transport him to their jurisdiction. There he would face charges of shooting the off-duty police officer. But Cooper was preoccupied by the FBI's investigation. He demanded to take a lie detector test to prove his innocence. Cooper took one in Maryland, but failed miserably. That's when he finally broke.
I think that Carl felt that we had him in a box for the coffee shop murders, and that he was going to be charged with those, and that he was going to go down for those. So he wanted to put his spin on it to put him in the best light possible. Of course, with him being the only person, who could he blame it on but the victims? And that's what he tried to do.
Cooper actually made 3 separate confessions, each time taking more of the blame. In his final confession, he claimed total responsibility for the coffee shop killings. He said he planned and carried out the robbery after spending time casing the shop. He called his accomplice, the barber, but then decided he could handle it on his own. He didn't want to lose the window of opportunity after the shop closed and before the crew went home. He admitted to Sergeant Joseph McCann that he brought 2 weapons to the scene, which was his signature.
Carl Cooper's approach when he committed robberies was very businesslike. It was a business to him. It was not personal. If you did exactly as he said, usually you would make it out of there.
But on that night, 3 of Cooper's victims did not. At about 9:20, Katie Mahoney, Emery Evans, and Aaron Goodrich were towards the end of their cleanup routine. For some reason, no one will ever know why. When Cooper arrived at the shop, the door was unlocked. He ordered everyone into the back office where the safe was kept.
Go in the back room, then move it, move it. Back room.
According to Cooper, the female manager tried to escape when he fired his warning shot into the ceiling. Cooper began to lose control of the situation and of his temper. He shot her first, then the others. Cooper shot Katie 4 more times and left with nothing.
I think people were very surprised that one individual had committed this act. That I think it's beyond most people's comprehension that one person could go in where there's 3 employees and try to commit a robbery.
He said he rushed back home, laundered his clothes, and disposed of the weapons. They were never recovered. In February 2000, more than 2 years after the triple homicide, Carl Cooper confessed to and was convicted of 48 charges stemming from that crime, as well as the murder of a security guard, the shooting of the off-duty police officer, the robbery of the pizzeria, and leading a racketeering enterprise. By pleading guilty, Cooper avoided the death penalty. He was serving a life sentence with no possibility of parole and no appeal.